I am so excited to bring to you not just any guest, but a VIP, someone without whom, if this individual didn't help, I don't know that there would be a Ghostbusters 84 the way that we know it. And so we are excited to have a conversation with Mr. John Bruno. John, how are you today?
I'm fine. This is great. Thanks.
It's great to meet
Yeah.
you, sir. Matt, I thought you were talking about me for a second. I'm not that important. All right. Obviously, John has way larger contributions.
Yeah, he might have had a little bit more to do with the movie than you did, Tom. I mean, we
Fair enough.
consumed it a lot, but we
This is true.
didn't
Yeah.
create much. Um, so John, I figured, again, thank you for being willing to sign for our group. And we do these things to help people, one, get familiar with you, but two, just to ask questions that I know that a lot of us would love to ask. And so really, before we get to the Ghostbusters stuff, I know that you grew up a bit of a comic book fan. Is that true? Is that where kind of you got your start in the industry?
Uh, I lived. I grew up in Monterey, California, uh, Central California, and in that area for years there were a lot of cartoonists or comic strip cartoonists, and uh, and as a kid, they were. I'd open the local paper, and there would be Dennis the Menace and Short Ribs and Gordo and a lot of comic strips, and all these guys lived on the Monterey Peninsula, the majority of them. Hank Ketchum for one, uh, and and uh, and but there was one person in particular. Two people like took me under their wing when I was 12. My mother actually, there was some sort of local event. My mother brought me to meet them, which was Eldon Dedini, who was a Playboy and New Yorker cartoonist, and Gus Ariola, who did a comic strip called Gordo. Uh, they had a number of papers, but Dennis the Menace, I was a huge fan of, and that was uh, Hank Ketchum. And Hank Ketchum lived in Carmel Valley, uh, and there was a park in town called Dennis the Menace Park, uh, down near the ocean, that he had basically funded. And anyway, at one point I got to meet him. My mother brought me to meet him, and he, and then I knew at one point that's exactly what I wanted to be, a cartoonist, because everybody I knew in town seemed to be cartoonists. And in high school, I eventually uh, I was started to ghost a comic strip called Short Ribs, Frank O'Neill, and then at one point I was out of high school. I had a relative who knew some people here in Los Angeles, um, who said, we had this sort of family meeting one day, and he goes, "Oh, here you want to be an animator?" I went, "Well, yeah, because I grew up on the Disney, watching Disney TV, the Mickey Mouse Club, and all that stuff. I'm talking early,
Mm-hmm.
but I would watch all those, Squash and Stretch, early Disney cartoons, which were available on television on their show." And I went, "Yeah, I want to do that because I like the way it was drawn." And so me, I took a number of letters from all my cartoonist friends. I got a letter from Hank Ketchum, I had a letter from Gus Ariola, Eldon Nadini, who had worked at Disney throughout the years and had gone to the Art Center in the 30s, and they all, anybody who was seemed to anybody at the time had one time worked at Disney Studios. So um, uh, uh, my parents drove me down. It's hilarious when I think about it now. And I went in with some samples of my art and letters from all these cartoonists. And There
Probably
was
got to be one of the highly recommended people they've had come through their doors with all those letters.
but I had no idea what this meant. I was 18 or 19. And anyway, when I met with the production manager, they said, well, there's no openings in animation, but there's a lot of open. He walked me over to the comic book and comic strip section, because that's what I was doing in those days. And it's like, you can do Mickey Mouse, or if you want, you can do Donald Duck comic books. And I said, I want to do Donald Duck comic books, I guess, And what was really bizarre, and I'll say this now, but at the time it freaked me out. It was the people in there, the guy who ran the place, Tom something. He liked my work, and they brought out a bunch of samples of the finished comic strips, and then the sort of pre-designed rough pencil sketches of the pages, and then the script, which were panels, just roughly drawn out with the dialogue. And I was like, why don't you take these back home with you and practice with this stuff, and then come back in a week or so. And but they would all talk like Donald Duck. It was weird. And they would and when they would talk, and they would use hand gestures like this with the three fingers. I've never gotten over that. It was just, when you look at all the early animation stuff, and that's if they only had three fingers. Mm-hmm. So anyway, at one point, who was his name? Oh, I wish I could remember. Tom. He said, "Look, I just heard that the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce is sort of helping, is having some group event where there's like 1,000 people. They'll take 1,000 people, and of those 1,000 people, they're going to pick 8 to be given. This is sponsored by the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce. Given the opportunity to work in animation with Irv Spence, who is who at the time, he was working at Chuck Jones, but he used to do Tom and Jerry cartoons, theatrical cartoons, and so he was sort of one of the famous guys. And anyway, I got picked, and I have to believe that I got picked because they just looked on my resume and it said Disney. They didn't know what I did at Disney. I knew nothing about animation. I'd never seen a disc, animation disc, or ever flipped pages. I didn't. And so they said, okay, every Wednesday night, once a week, we're going to meet at Hanna-Barbera, because it's central. At 7 o'clock at night, everybody show up, and we'd go in this room, and there'd be some animation tables and desks. And everybody in there was already at least an assistant animator, and they knew how to do all this. And I just sort of sat down, and he had given us an assignment, and like, animate this character, make this character walk. And I would look over everybody's shoulder and see how they were flipping, put the pages between your fingers and draw on one page and another page, and then find the middle ground. But and I have to believe it's because the Disney comic book style, this thick and thin line. Mm-hmm. Irv Spence said, I really like the way you draw. I like the way you finish art. And I had no idea. And we had to animate a scene, and then you'd go away, and they'd have it filmed, shoot it out, and then the following week they would run it. We'd sit in a room, and they would project and pencil test what you did. And he liked what I did, and I was I had no idea what any of this meant because I had never done it before. And and then at one point I said, I came down here for a limited period of time. I have to go home. I don't have a job, and I'm going to head back. And he said, what do you mean? I go, well, I need a job. And he goes, well, come and work for me. So he hired me um, at MGM. He was at MGM, which is Sunset and Vine Tower, to do what was the film TV show called Horton Hears a Who.
Mm.
So that was my first job in animation, and at Chuck Jones Animation. So, and there I met all the best people in animation at the time. They're all working there, and that sort of started me off. I better let you ask me a question.
Yeah, no, I mean, you just dropped like some of the biggest names in animation, and
very, very casually.
Yeah, that's
pretty incredible.
impressive.
But I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah,
it just sort of happened.
So speaking of big names,
here we go.
Is it true that you've met Elvis? That you have a story around meeting Elvis?
Yeah, I did. Personally. Yeah, at the time. So at the time, since I was I was going to go home, and a friend of mine worked at Honda. He was from Monterey. I used to do drag racing motorcycles at this time. I was 16 through 18, and he came down, and also he got a job at Bill Robertson's Honda motorcycles. There's no cars yet, just the Honda motorcycles. And he said, I met this guy, and you gotta meet this guy, Skip Van Leeuwen. He's a factory racer. He's sponsored by Bill Robertson Honda, and he's a national number, meaning he's in the top 100 motorcycle racers in the nation. And it was dirt bikes at the time. It was, half-mile ovals, quarter-mile ovals, what they call TT, and Ascot TT in South here. I met Skip, and I said, hey man, I have a job, but I don't have a place to stay. Can I rent a room from you? And he says, sure. And he charged me $10. He says, I go racing. I'm out of town a lot. So why don't you stay here and you just take care of the place, because we're going to Daytona and we'll be gone for like 2 weeks. And then we're going to go to some different places in Oregon and different places around the state. Texas, they're going to do the Astrodome. And so I became sort of a house sitter for $10 a month or $10 a week, whatever the hell it was, and in Hollywood. and now through Skip, I started meeting people. Would call or come by looking for him, and then one day the phone rings and it's somebody says, "Hi, I'm looking for Skip." I went, well, he's not here. He's in Florida. He goes, "Who's this?" This is John. He goes, "John, this is Evel Knievel." He goes, "You know where I am, John?" I went, "No, Evel." He goes, I'm in the hospital in Las Vegas. I crashed. I was trying to jump trying to do some jump, and I crashed. And he talked to me for an hour. I went, wow, Evel Knievel. And so anyway, all these people started, Kenny Rogers showed up one time. Mike Nesmith was a friend of his. And I started meeting all these people. And then one day I was Skip was back, and he was at Bill Robertson's, and this actually was part of a famous story. I'm getting to Elvis, where Elvis had purchased 9 motorcycles for friends. It's kind of a known story, but I didn't realize, I never made the connection till recently. So I was taking a rent check to Skip, but in the afternoon, I basically drove down there and I went into his office and he goes, "Hey man, you know who I just sold 9 motorcycles to Elvis Presley." I went, "Really? Like the Elvis Presley?" He said, "Yeah." He goes, he's whatever he was doing, buying for friends of his, and he said to, and now he's in the shop there. He's buying helmet and gear for everybody too. He's getting that. He goes, "So you want to meet him?" And I went, "Sure." So he just walks me into the manager's office, and Elvis is standing there, and I have to say, this guy was strikingly handsome. I mean, it freaked me out. I mean, his physical presence, I couldn't believe it. I mean, it was like, in reality, this guy was stunningly handsome. I like, he had, the black chops, and he clearly had jet black hair, so he must have dyed it, I guess, and those gold rimmed glasses. And he goes, "Hey, please, happy to meet you," and all this stuff. And he kept the conversation going. And it was just me and him talking. And that's, it was, I tell people that and they all freak out, but I went, you can't believe, I see why this guy was such a success. I mean, this is the 1970s slim Elvis, wearing black.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And he was about to start the Las Vegas thing. But he was in Hollywood because he was making those Elvis movies.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that's my story with Elvis.
That's cool.
Simple as that.
I don't think I've ever spoken with anyone that's met Elvis, but he's this larger than life kind of person. Like somebody else who worked on the first film met John Lennon, and that was something that we also got really excited about, because these folks, we look up to them, but the truth is they were done before we were even born. But I want to stick around in the 1970s real quick, because you worked on something else in the late 70s that has captured my imagination for a very long time. And I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about your work with John Chambers on Argo.
Oh. Well, that's kind of a fluky story. Let's see. I had when I was in animation, I had split my time. In fact, I was working at Hanna-Barbera at the time, doing a bunch of weird, what was I doing? Super Friends, and I was doing layout and storyboard. Super Friends. What was Scooby-Doo? And
wow.
And
just Scooby-Doo.
Yeah. Well, it was. There was no movies. There was just this animated thing. And then Captain Caveman. I did do Godzilla. And one of my layout, the guy that worked with me in the layout department was Dave Stevens, did Rocketeer. And this is all before anybody would, he eventually, that became a movie, but that became a comic book. But this guy was a really good layout artist, illustrator. And so I would split, but there was animation in that era was seasonal. So once all the series were done for television, there was no features. There was only features at maybe Disney, something like that. And then what happened? I got a call from Matt. God, who was it? What was it, Matt? It was, got a name. Oh, Matty Simmons from Universal. And he was a publisher of National Lampoon and Heavy Metal magazine. And he got me. He said, we're doing something in an animated feature, and we want you to come over here. I'd like to talk to you and see if you can be involved. So at lunchtime, I went over, and in his office was a guy named Ivan Reitman, Canadian guy. And Ivan had produced films like what was it? He produced Animal House, but he also directed Meatballs and what was the other one? Stripes. He was in the middle of setting those up. And he had this double page spread from Heavy Metal of Arzak, which is a Mobius double page. It's beautiful. He goes, so can you do this in animation? Can this be done? I went, sure. He goes, well, I'm going to do this film. I'm putting money together to do Heavy Metal, and it's going to be done in Canada. Went, yeah. So you'd be interested in doing it. I said, yeah. So I'll jump ahead. I did Heavy Metal, and we can talk about that later. But when I finish and come back, John Chambers, I would split my time between animation and my friend John Chambers, who basically I really wanted to do makeup, creature effects, because he had done Planet of the Apes, and for some reason he took me under his wing, and I worked with him in his garage in Burbank, which is right behind, his house was right behind Disney Studios. And but I wasn't in the union. You had to be in order to go work on the lots or work on an actual movie with makeup. It was union, very, very tight. So I could work in his garage, and I would help him do really weird things like, today I have to make up a couple of dozen Spock ears, or a couple, and he would, I would help him do the stuff and do the pores and dry him and lay him out. And there's another guy, I think it was Bob Seidel, used to come in there. And at one point, he asked me, when I had come back from Heavy Metal, he said, oh, and from time to time, I would do some character sketches. He would give me pictures of the actors and said, I want this guy to look like an old prospector. So I would take his photograph, and I would sketch up various looks that this guy could have, sunburn, grizzled beards, and he would take these and they would spread them out in the animation department, in the makeup department, and that was side of they would start with the look, because they would have different people do design. So every once in a while he'd do that, pay me a couple $100, and which was more money than I would make working somewhere else. And at one point, he says, hey, I have this other project coming up. Maybe I'd like you to, and if you have time, could you do it? And I said, I got time. What is it? And he goes, it's Jason and the Argonauts. His ship was called Argo. And I went, oh, really? Didn't know that. And he said, and there's scouts out in different places, desert locations, Middle East. And I said, in Iran, they're in Iran, Iraq, different places like that. I went, really? Can you go there? And he goes, if you're in the film business, you can go anywhere. He did say that. And when we were working, when working in his garage, I have a picture. When working in his garage, he would say, he would do these knock-knock jokes. So let me get this lined up here. That's wow. Actually me. Where is it? That's his father, who's 100 years old. But that, you can have John Chambers in his sort of dental gear, and then he got a star on Hollywood Boulevard. I always say I look more like Ben Affleck than Ben Affleck in that picture. And we were really good friends. And anyway, he would, you'd be working and he'd just say, knock, 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 knock. Who's there? He goes, Argo. I said, Argo who? Argo, fuck yourself. He really thought that was funny, and he did it all the time and then laughed. which worked into, eventually the movie. But it's true. He really did that. And so he said, look, we got this, we're working, we got a place, Gower Studios, Sunset and Gower, in Hollywood. Could you just show up there and work? Because we have to, I don't know this film's really going to happen. We're not 100% sure, but it's in development. But we'd like you, we need somebody in the office. And also you have to answer the phone if somebody calls. So I'd go in there. There's, a small room, four desks, one, two, three desks. And there was another room that Robert Seidel would come in occasionally. But it was called Studio 6 Productions on the door. And John would be in the other corner, and I would make coffee. And any sketch I would do, I'd stick on the wall behind me. I'd tape them. And every once in a while, he would take these sketches and disappear. And then said he was going to send them to whoever, the scouts. And then I asked it, it would really be helpful if I had a script. I could. He goes on. There's really no script. Besides, script is shit. You don't want it. It's not really good. Don't worry about the script. Okay. So, but and then years later, I found out because people talk about the artwork that was involved. I don't have any. Sorry to say, but it was previous. What I discovered that previous to all this happening, there was no script, there was no story, and it was all around. He had some previous artwork from Jack Kirby called Lord of Light. Jack Kirby actually didn't work on this film, but they used his art and then sketches that I did. But they had a package of this stuff and spaceship stuff, and so that's kind of the story. and then one day, a guy comes in, fellow comes in, and he's got a briefcase, and he on the table next to me, he opens the briefcase and it's full of $100 bills, and wrapped $100 bills, and I'm looking at that, and I'm looking at John, and I'm like, is this real? And the guy just comes over to me and he goes, and he starts counting. I go, how many weeks you been here? I'm like, 2. And he goes, 1, 2, 3. He gives me $400. And this is for, the next 2 weeks. And then I look at John and he's like, it's like, yeah, it's okay. Don't worry about it. It's okay. And this was theoretically the Ben Affleck character. Then when that was finished, I left. Didn't think another thing about it because it was one of those, John Chamber jobs. They, paid cash. And I said, do I have to sign for this? And he goes, no, don't worry about it. And you don't have to tell anybody. Okay. So 32 years later, I'm in a theater in Pasadena. And here's this trailer pops up and it's talking about John Chambers and Argo. And I'm like, Argo. And the making of this story. I had no idea. Not a clue. Never, not once was it ever mentioned, not once. The only thing he said was, one day he answered the phone and he goes, well, we're done. Everybody's back. I guess just go home. Like, okay. And I said, it's not going to happen. The movie's not going to happen. Okay. All right. I thought it was legitimate for real. And that's my story.
Wow. I love that the only thing that he really said to give it away was like, I don't know if it's going to go forward or not.
Yeah.
Kind of interesting. Yeah. Wow. Very cool.
But they was very happy that it wasn't going to happen. The movie. Okay.
First time ever.
Yeah.
So let's move towards Ghostbusters here. So I know that at some point you've already connected with Ivan on heavy metal.
Mm-hmm.
And then how do you so what's the bridge from there to Ghostbusters in 84?
So I'm in Montreal doing heavy metal. I would talk a couple of times a week. Ivan wasn't wherever he was, Los Angeles. I would talk to him because I would send sketches. I expanded the movie into Tarna. Tarna was Arzak, and I had become really good friends with Mobius. And but they never worked out a deal to do Arzak. So it was converted to to, to Tarna. And I had basically made up or expanded this very small story, which became the main 27 minutes, I think, of the theme of the film. And I was talking to Ivan because he goes, I gotta move the production schedule up. It's better for the movie. If it's released in the summer, 6 months earlier than originally planned. So we worked round the clock, and then working on this. And there was, and on the animation camera, there was a guy from Hollywood. God, I should have written his name down. I'm sorry. Who was a friend of Richard Edlund's, and he came in one day. He goes, Richard Edlund's coming into town to the Canadian Film Board to talk about Empire Strikes Back and show clips. I told him, he said he's looking for somebody for animation for the next film they're going to do. And I told him about you. So I went to this sort of, it wasn't a conference. It was just he was giving a talk on ILM and how they do and what they do in animation and how they do visual effects. And I went to that and I introduced myself to him and I said, I would love to work with you. And he goes, well, when you're finished, come and look me up, which is exactly what I did. I got to Los Angeles. We were doing post work. I was doing the multiplane shots for Tarna in this little studio in downtown Hollywood, and we had hired Max Morgan, an original Disney, the guy that did multiplane shots for all the Disney features, and I hired him, and he built this rig out of metal framework, and there was wire screws and tape, and we would hand move each level, but he knew how to light. The main thing is he knew how to light what type of glass was needed at this 6 levels, and what kind of lighting and how to expose it to have this 3-dimensional depths, these shots, so you could rack focus starting the bottom and pull up. So that was the flight through that giant dinosaur skeleton for Tarna, and I was doing that, and then I had the reel. It was 90% complete of Tarna sequence, and I called Richard, and he said to come down to MGM, which was now Sony, but at the time it was MGM, Columbia, and I went there, and I was in the studio, producer studio 1, which turned out to be Steven Spielberg's office, and they were finishing. They were doing the last color post timing of Raiders of the Lost Ark. So George walked through, and then Steven walked through. I was sitting in a corridor, and oh man, I don't know if I want here. I'm just an animation guy. And then Richard comes in, and then we went in to see. He goes, "Hey, you're John. You have that reel? Yeah, come on, man. Let's go run that reel." So I ran the Tarna sequence. George peeked in, and he just said, "Okay, when can you start? We need somebody to do ghosts for this other movie that Steven's about to do called Poltergeist. They're about to start, and we'll you want to do that? You'd have to move up there." And I went, "Okay." So I did. It was really freaky because I didn't know if I was really going to stay, because this was like real filmmaking, and they did all kinds of what Richard had done in the layout of ILM was you could just walk. There's a center corridor, and then all these stages on both sides of the corridor, big black curtains, and all kinds of things were going on at the same time. Like on this stage, doing some Jedi shots, and this stage, it's there'd be Wrath of Khan. There'd be something we have to do for Wrath of Khan, some insert, Poltergeist. And I remember walking back to the animation department in the very back. And I was doing ectoplasm, but on the way back, one of the guys in the pyrotechnic division, Thane Morris, says, "Hey, Bruno, come over here." And in the middle of this, it was just an empty stage wrapped in black, and in the rigging above, in the girders, was a part of a spaceship, the Reliant. It was hanging upside down.
Nice.
And I know this now. I didn't know it then. And a chair in the middle of the room, and he walks out, and he's got these copper wires, and he goes, "Here, hold these in your hand. Hold these when I tell you, let go, but do not let go. Do not, keep these wires tight, and don't do anything until I tell you." Okay. Because when I say, go, you can basically release the pressure on these copper wires. Okay. And then I'm sitting there in this chair, because then everybody disappears, and I'm thinking, is this one of those gags, those introduction things of, you work at an airport and somebody says, "Hey, go over to that hangar and get a gallon of prop wash." It's like a joke, and they keep you. We're out of prop wash. Go across the airport to that other hangar 4 and they might have some. And so it's just sort of an initiation. I'm thinking this has got to be a joke. And then I hear 3, 2, 1. I hear a high-speed camera going, and then I hear things says, "Let go, release," and I let go, and above me, this spaceship explodes, and all this debris is falling straight down. This is one of those zero gravity shots that it's in the movie. It's only brief clips, and then it's like, "Okay, thank you," and then I moved on to the next thing. And that's what ILM was at that time. You worked on whatever, everybody worked on whatever was needed. Same thing with the imploding house for Poltergeist. That was the model shop had been working forever on a 10th scale house, and it was the same thing. It was laying on its back. The camera was above, shooting straight down, and there was a forklift with cables, and they had delicately wired. There's these wires working in different parts of the interior working structure of this house, and they pulled it through this steel tube, a pipe, and they got this high-speed shot. They got that rolling. The forklift backed up and pulled the house in through this hole. The whole thing just started collapsing and pulling. And the final shot was Mike Pangrazio had done a matte painting of the empty house, or a lot with no house. And then this house was composited on top of it. And then on top of that, like they didn't have any glass and there was lots of roof tiles. So that was sent to the animation department, and Terry Wendell, I think, was one of the guys in charge of that, had to animate, roofing tiles, like swarms of leaves, like going into the center of the hole. And then the overall thing, I put a glow over this horizontal glow over the whole thing. And that again was, walking down the corridor. And sorry, I just happen to have this. This is
awesome.
That is so cool.
This came out of the TV set.
Yeah.
A little girl. And then turned into animation ectoplasm, going away into the room. I'm selling that, so it's happened to be on my table. But that was the other thing. It's like everybody had to come up with ways. All ideas are welcome. How would you do this shot? The hand coming out of the TV set with the little girl, Carol Ann. They'd already shot that plate, but that was one of the things we did. So one day I'm in my office and the phone rings, and it's Ivan Reitman's office. And he says, they want to know if you think Richard Edlund would work on a comedy version of a film like Poltergeist. And I went, I don't know. Gotta ask him. He goes, well, I'll give you his extension number, but go ahead and give him a call. And then a little while later, then I forgot about that. A little while later, Richard comes in the office and says, hey, Ivan Reitman? I went, yeah. He goes, yeah, he did, Meatballs and produced Animal House and a film called Stripes. He goes, well, he wants to do like a comedy Poltergeist with the cast of Saturday Night Live. I went, oh, okay. As I'm flying down, I'm gonna go talk to him. So he basically one day comes in and goes, I'm gonna do that movie. We're leaving ILM, gonna build this studio, and he wants 8 or 9 of us from that were there, invited all of us to join the company. And that's what we did. We all came down having no idea what that meant. He was building a studio. He partnered with Richard Urasich and Doug Trumbull at a company called EEG in Marina del Rey. And it was, but instead of VistaVision equipment, it was all 65 millimeter. Everything was huge film, huge cameras. And one of the requirements, and I started storyboarding the film immediately. Brought Terry Wendell came down and started storyboarding. We had just the key members of the company just working around. We didn't, but what we were told is, we have 10 months to do this. The film comes out in 10 months. Mm-hmm. What? So it's like, so part of it was we're going to use, this is pre-digital. We're going to use models, miniatures, and puppet suits, guys in suits. And I had never done that, but so all I know is we brought in a guy like Mark Stetson was doing the any props and models and miniatures. Steve Johnson was going to do creature work, puppets, and there was a model department, a creature department, animation department, and we'd shoot on stage. And then as far as there was one shot when in the storyboards when everything at the end of the movie when the rooftop explodes, the marshmallow has to melt, and the scale of things had to be slowed down. So there's two things that Richard set up: a machine shop with Gene. I'm trying to think of my friend Gene. He built a high-speed 65 millimeter camera and built what's called a zap printer, a zoom aerial printer. That's 65 millimeter reduction to 35 anamorphic printer for the shots, and they weren't built yet. So part of the schedule was not only did we have to get ready to shoot this stuff, and we get Bill Bryan he built the Marshmallow Man suit. We had no idea what that was going to look like, but and Slimer shot on stage. All these things had to be ready by certain dates, along with the printer to composite the elements, and along with the camera to shoot them. Wasn't done yet. It was just part of the schedule. And this release date, like in October, this is going to be done. This camera's going to be ready, and then we're going to shoot the Marshmallow Man. And at this date, we'll have to use another, excuse me. We'll have to get for Slimer, we're going to rent a camera. We got the 65 millimeter camera that was used for Lawrence of Arabia. I remember that the Lawrence cam is going to be available for Slimer. I'm like, really? It's kind of cool. And so that's what I'm sorry.
No problem.
So we just continued in that way until the film was complete, and it got so tight on the schedule. I remember that they had completed all reels but the reel 10, and in reel 10 was again the Marshmallow Man coming up to Columbus Circle, and then getting blown up, and then the whole rooftop explodes. And the last two shots I remember, because we had 2 weeks before the film came out, and I came in on a Sunday, and there's my friend, our optical department, one of the really good compositors, name was Bruno George, and I've discussed this many times, so if it sounds weird what I'm about to say, he approves. But I walked in, and over the speed, all the lights were on in Boss Film. This is a big place. It had big stages, work stages and water tanks, and just model shop, and wherever I went, the lights were on Sunday morning. And I'm looking around, I look on the stage, and then playing like at 11 is Jimi Hendrix, Purple Haze. And I'm like, hello, anybody here? There's nobody there. And I walked in, and in the optical department, there's double doors because they have to keep the dust out. And there's this sort of sticky tape that's when you walk in and take the dust from your shoes, or dirt from your shoes, but the doors were open, and the lights were on. Shit. And I walk in, and I can hear clickety, 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 and the zap printer. I walked over to it, and laying on top of it was an empty bottle of Jack Daniels and a pile of metal shavings under the working under the claw, that's moving the film forward, and like, it's done. Like, holy crap, it's damaged. There's no more work going to be on this thing ever. In the next couple of weeks for sure. They have to rebuild this thing. And so I'm walking around like, and Bruno George was finishing the shots. And so I'm calling for Bruno, and upstairs, in this, we had a sort of a conference room upstairs near my office, and a couch. And on the couch is Bruno George, laid out. And I said, "Hey, man, are those shots done? Did we get him out before?" He goes, "Oh yeah." He sits up and he goes, "GT 73 and GT 76 are done, and they're out." So I found these storyboards, these shots are done. The last 2 shots of Ghostbusters.
Is that your storyboard, the one you're holding up right now? Did you draw that?
Yeah, these are the storyboards.
I have a print of that completed shot that I picked up on eBay. Very nice.
And it looks like the shot.
Yeah.
So we had this thing of because of animation, my history in animation, that everything had to look. This is the shot. This is what it's going to look like. And what we found early on is, and this to the bane of a lot of producers, that I would do shots and went, "This is what the shot," Richard and the other supervisors and other special effects people saying, "We can do that shot. The shot will look like that." I had done that because when I came back from heavy metal, John Chambers set up a meeting with me and John Landis. John Landis was going to do a film, American Werewolf in London. And I went over to, he's looking for an illustrator. So I went over to his place in Universal, and he started, he was reading reviews of the Blues Brothers. He was sitting on the floor of his office, and he had this big stack and he's like, and he was disappointed that some people didn't like the film. And I remember asking him, I said, "So does it actually bother you if somebody, you made your film?" He goes, "But if somebody doesn't like it," he goes, "Yeah, it bothers me. You want people to like your movie." I'm like, "Oh yeah, I guess that's true." And but luckily it was a success. And so he goes, we were still on the floor, and he started talking about American Werewolf in London, and we started doing some rough sketches on the floor of his office. And then I went home and I cleaned them up, tightened them up. And then we drove over to Rick Baker's place, and he took those storyboards and pinned them up on a board, said, "I'm going to use these shots. This is what the shot's going to look like." And I'm designing these shots to these drawings. And he goes, okay, in order to budget it. And that's when I first learned that. Oh, and also working at that place was Steve Johnson at the time, who I never met on American Werewolf. And so that was my first foray into live action was John Landis. And who wrote the foreword to Navigator, which we can talk about later. So anyway, where was I? We were talking. Oh, so Ivan Reitman, we had done these storyboards, and I said, "This is what these shots are going to look like." We're designing and shooting because we have a 3-month schedule. This is the shot. This is what it's going to look like. And you have, if you approved it, and if you change it, that's a change order. That's where all that stuff started. So we were very adamant about this. This is the angle at the time. We had no digital. Today you can move and drift, and you can do all kinds of stuff, but not in the age of shots were kind of locked off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all those shots. I remember Ivan wanted to change that explosion. He thought the explosion was too big and would have killed them, killed everybody on the roof. But but that's the joke. I mean, when you cut to them all covered in marshmallow, it's a laugh. I mean, he was so stressed. He goes, I don't know, I can't believe it. You know, my whole movie ends on this on a marshmallow man. I mean, you know, nobody knew if it was funny. You know, it's like, I don't know. And so when we did screen test it in Seattle, the audience went nuts because it is kind of silly. And if you look at the quality of the work of actually the sculpting, you see the Marshmallow Man just standing there. It's funny.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the same thing with Slimer. Slimer is just funny. Just looking at the suit, you know, without. Anyway, I've been talking. You guys have to have a question.
Yeah, no. I mean, I'm just sitting here listening, taking it all in. I'm loving every
Yeah.
bit of it.
Yeah. I wanted to just really quickly, I wanted to ask, because you were talking about the storyboards. Is there anything that you storyboarded that you remember that didn't make it in that you
That
wish
didn't
had?
make it in?
Yeah.
There's a 3D, well, one of them's a 3D theater. We had the Three Stooges. That just cut to when the ghosts were escaping, coming out of the Twin Towers. Isn't that weird? One of the shots where the ghost went into a movie theater, and then there was a shot where people were watching a 3D Three Stooges movie, and the screen sort of expands. It balloons up like a big balloon and explodes, and then ghosts fly through. Do you have that? Yes.
Excellent.
Okay.
Very cool.
You're ahead of me. And that got dropped, and then there was something else that got dropped. Probably only because of time. Can't think of it right now. But sorry, I'm drawing a blank.
All good.
Yeah. So just curious, you know, we're working on all these projects. We're having everybody sign that worked on the different creatures and ghosts from the film. Do you have a particular favorite that you worked on in Ghostbusters 1?
It's the Marshmallow Man sequence, and there's just a few of the Slimer shots, only because the best lines are in those sequences from the guys.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
There's something you don't see every day. I mean, I've said that so many times. You know, it just I can't tell you one specific shot, but the reveal of the Marshmallow Man and him walking up the street is just funny.
Yeah, I love, speaking of lines, the one that I think and I say all the time, but not everyone gets it, is, "What did you do, Ray?"
What did you do, Ray? It was in my childhood at Camp Wakanda.
Yeah, just I love that. I absolutely love that. Was there any conversation about you ever working on the? Oh, go ahead.
I guess I can say this now, but so during the screening of that shot, one of the lines came from one of the characters, when the Marshmallow Man revealed, there was some sort of throwaway lines and additional lines that the guys would make up on the time and try to throw different things out. And I'm blanking. I'm sorry. One of the characters steps forward and he goes, you know, somebody says, "Look," and you cut back to him and he says, "Fuck me." It got the biggest, and the Marshmallow Man got a huge laugh. And that was it stayed in the film for quite a while. And then, oh God, I can't think of his name. What's wrong with me? that character walks up on the way back to Ivan's office. He goes, Ivan, please, could you please drop that line? I don't want my kids to hear me say, fuck me.
Who was it?
Sounds like a Harold
Harold?
Ramis move.
Yeah.
Harold Ramis. Thank you. Yeah, Harold Ramis was really bothered by it, although it got the biggest laugh, and I haven't said, but it's the biggest laugh.
Yeah,
because
it's so out of character.
Yeah. And so that was dropped.
Oh man,
that's a shame. That sounds funny as heck.
Yeah.
Was there any conversation about you working on the sequel at all?
Yeah, there was. I got a call to do the sequel. They were starting, and that was exactly the time I was starting The Abyss,
which dovetails pretty perfectly into my next question. I know we're running out of time here, but I would be remiss if I didn't just pick your brain quickly on I assume a friend of yours, Jim Cameron. You've worked on at two of the highest grossing movies of all time.
No big deal.
And I see that little gold guy behind you there for The Abyss, I believe.
That's The Abyss.
Yeah. So,
that's diving the Titanic.
So what is that experience like? You got to see the Titanic and you won an Academy Award and you worked on T2 and all these incredible movies that Jim Cameron did, like just
I even
live in that
T2 3D.
Yes.
Which I love that attraction, by the way. That was great.
Thank you. The Abyss was one of those things where I got why did I get a call from Jim? Oh, so there's all of my friends, everybody is completely ingrained in film and motion pictures and summer movies. And somebody said, hey, the guy that did Terminator, he's got this film Aliens, and let's all go. It's opening in Westwood, like a Friday night or something. We all friends of ours would get in line. Used to do that, hold the position in line, and go to see this. Let's go see the Aliens 2. So when they let everybody in the theater, I found a place in the middle, mixing distance, when you mix sound and dialogue in a mixing stage, it's like right in the certain sweet spot in the theater. So I would always work myself into that area. So I'm sitting there and about 10 minutes later, Jim Cameron and Gail Hurd sit right in front of me. So we watched the movie, and of course it was outstanding. And they got up and left. I went, shit, I want to talk to that guy, because I had previous to that, I was asked to because I had worked on Poltergeist 2, and we were asked to go to the Tokyo Film Festival to basically, talk about the making of the movie, and they had panels and all kinds of stuff. And one of the things they told me was that Jim Cameron was going to go to do that with Aliens. So I saw him in the lobby, and I kind of worked my way up to him and said, "Hey, I'm John Bruno. I worked with Sigourney Weaver before this," and he goes, "Oh yeah, I know who you are." And I said, "And just wanted to say I'm going to the Tokyo Film Festival, and I was told that you were going to go. You also were going to go." And he goes, "Yeah, we got to talk about that." And Gail immediately just, "Well, we got to go to this next thing, Jim." It was like she was being the producer and moving him around. And he goes, "Well, I'll see you in Tokyo," which is what happened. And we just immediately hit it off. I mean, just I'd never met the guy before. It was funny because they had paid us to do these talk shows. We did radio conversations about each film and whatever film, again, just sort of talking about film. And then at the end of this week of stuff, each of us was given this big packet of cash, like 10,000 yen or $10,000 in yen, just a big thick packet. And we both looked at each other and at the exact same time said, "Let's spend it." I said, we should go to Kyoto. He goes, so we went down to, I had somebody in the concierge at the hotel and said, we want to go, we don't speak Japanese. We want to go to Kyoto. And he goes, oh, it's, Japan is very civilized. He just wrote down on a business card from the hotel, at this station, show this to the conductor, and he'll tell you when to get off, and he'll tell you where to go. And so we basically went down to the Shinkansen, the bullet train, and off we were going 178 miles an hour toward Kyoto, 2.5 hour flight. I mean, that thing was like, full on. And when we, I showed the card to the conductor, who came back and said, you get off, in Japanese, the next station, please. And we got off. We showed the name of the hotel. It was a traditional Japanese hotel that an inn that it was amazing. It's like you go in, and I had a 12 tatami mat room. So everything in Japan is laid out 3x6 squares, but one tatami. The entire country, like the city, in the Ginza district, you buy your lot by not square feet, but by tatamis. So it's $1 million per tatami in this bank. Like, how big is this bank? Anyway, we had a 12 tatami mat room. Jim had a 24 tatami mat room. And but the first thing they do is you have to get out of your Western clothes, put on a kimono, and then as you're changing, they stick you in a hot bathtub while they change the room again. And then we're going to have dinner in his room, and we ordered a geisha to provide the tea ceremony, and she comes with an assistant who folds her clothes, and she's painted, her face is white with the headgear. And it's just an amazing, and the concept historically in Japan was, this is a moving porcelain doll. And we were just like, this is unbelievable. And that constant feeding, and then the tea ceremony is it takes about a half an hour, and they grind the tea and they make the stuff, and then they sing a song. So from there we went to the historical Ichiriki geisha house, which is where the 47 Ronin, true story, actually met there to plot their attack on their former lord.
Wow.
They all died, but and then they have that. So we went to this place, and which is the most hilarious thing. It was very, very traditional. You never see, you turn to talk to somebody, and when you look back, your glass is full. You see the person who did that. And at the end, finally, Jim says, "Oh, come on, let's take a picture, everybody." So, and in the middle of all this, this tradition, one of the girls sitting next to Jim says, "Terminator 2." And we all just cracked up and went, "Oh, that's funny." Yeah, we kept thinking maybe they don't know who Jim is, we didn't know. So
That's cool.
Anyway, that's and then of course we were in trouble because we never told anybody where we went. We just disappeared. And the Japanese are very strict on everything is controlled, and you just completely, Jim Cameron and John Bruno are missing somewhere in Japan. And that was our. Have I covered
that?
No,
Yeah,
you've done a great job.
Fantastic. Yes.
So, we're going to wrap up here. I thank you again for your time. Before we go, I wanted to ask you about the Navigator. I know that's a project that you're working on, and it's releasing, I think, in May, right?
Yeah, end of May, May 17th. This is my workbook of the Navigator. All the pages. It's all done.
Nice.
It's been done for quite a while, but it's we're very happy with it. Dark Horse is incredibly happy. It's I guess we're gonna hopefully we're gonna be at the San Diego Comic-Con with it.
Ooh.
And
excellent.
I'm that story started in 2004, where it was a movie script, and a treatment with my friend Steve Berg, who's an illustrator who's done spectacular work over the years with Ridley Scott, a lot of people. He's a key designer of spaceships, suits. He was I met him on The Abyss. He was Ron Cobb's assistant, and in the tradition of Ron Cobb, everything that he designs works. That's the concept of it. And then Ron Thornton was a guy, a London animator, director, producer, and had a studio. And it was an idea that we put together and wrote a treatment for in 2004. And then we sold an option to it to a British producer in 2007. And so I did a first draft of the screenplay. And then I hired my friend Bill Wisher, who's a Jim Cameron, from the stable of Jim Cameron, Terminator 2, many things with, it was a screenwriter with Jim. And we basically hammered out this screenplay, 134 pages. And then we tried, I wanted to do it as a feature film. And, every time I try to, take some time to promote that, I get another film to do with Jim. I just was, I've been 34 years with Jim Cameron. And done all his films except Avatar 2. I did do Avatar. But the final, and I kind of forgot about it. And the San Diego Comic-Con, which one it opened, it all shut down for COVID. And I had gone down there to visit Mike Richardson from Dark Horse and some other friends of mine, actually. But he goes, "Hey, whatever happened to that, that space opera script?" Because he had read it. And let's just do that as a graphic novel. Easier said than done. I mean, I had to take this, overly descriptive movie screenplay and pare it down to 80 pages, into 4 20-page, theoretically 20-page books, comic books. And then he goes, "No, it's better as a graphic novel." And I couldn't get it below 96 pages, and that's what it turned out to be.
There you go.
And he put on what he called his number one guy, Jordi Armengol, Barcelona illustrator, really, really good. Yeah, it took, 4 months, 5 months. Took me, anyway, it took a year by the time it was completed and done, and then it got delayed. It was supposed to come out in January, then March, now May.
Well, it's coming.
Yeah, I know. It's, I had pre-ordered it myself, and I keep getting these things from Amazon. The new release, the new delivery date is this. Like, you'll get this by this date. So, but it's quite good.
Well, maybe we can offer some of the books to get signed in our signing in June. That would be exciting. We can offer them to our group, get the word out, and help promote and support your latest project.
Yeah, I'm gonna print the cover. I think I'm gonna do it poster size. I think that would be fun. It's the beautiful cover.
Mm-hmm.
Let's run it by again. It's just really nicely done. Wouldn't it be nice hanging as a poster?
Yeah. Sure, absolutely. Well, John, we thank you for your time. We went above and beyond what we had originally discussed, and so I apologize for that. But I could do this all day. I could go all day with you. And
well, I appreciate this. You guys asking. I appreciate everything you're doing, and thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, sir. Looking forward to seeing you in June.
Okay. Absolutely.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
Bye,
take care.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye now.